For years, Jeffrey Epstein's secrets were locked away in sealed court documents. Now, many of those files are open, and what they show is darker than most of us could have imagined. We're about to walk through the most disturbing details, from the powerful people named inside to a cover-up that reached the highest levels of society. This is the story of what might be America's biggest scandal.
Jeffrey
Epstein.
He's dead, he's gone.
So, what are these files, and why do they matter so much now? Let's break it down. Jeffrey Epstein was a rich financier and a convicted sex offender. For more than a decade, he ran a horrifying sex trafficking ring that target. Ed girls, some as young as 14, mostly in New York and Florida. In 2019, while waiting for his federal trial, Epstein died by suicide in his jail cell. His death kicked off a storm of questions about who might have been protected by his silence. For years, the full story was buried. That started to change, not because of one single law, but through a series of court orders and the eventual passage of the Epstein Files Transparency Act in November 2025. This law ordered the release of government records from the investigation. We're talking about a mountain of information, millions of pages of documents, including emails, flight logs, and photos gathered over 2 decades. The releases, especially those in late 2025 and early 2026, have finally started to pull back the curtain on a scandal many powerful people hoped would stay hidden forever. But as we're about to see, the release itself has been a mess, sparking allegations of excessive redactions and questions about why millions of pages are still being held back. The story of the files is almost as complicated as the crimes they describe. All right, let's get to the heart of it. We've gone through the thousands of pages that have been made public to bring you the 5 darkest secrets they reveal. First off, the sheer scale of this thing is mind-blowing. This was never just about one man. The documents reveal a sophisticated, well-oiled machine. This wasn't a lone wolf. It was an enterprise. Epstein had a whole network of employees and associates who were critical to his operation. Their job, as laid out in investigation memos, was to facilitate the abuse by contacting victims and setting up their meetings with Epstein. This was a long-running criminal conspiracy that operated right under everyone's noses in places like New York City and wealthy Palm Beach, Florida. The documents confirmed the victims were shockingly young, with some being only 14 years old, the size of the operation. The number of people who enabled it and how long it was allowed to go on is just staggering. It points to a systemic failure that goes way beyond one monster. The documented closeness to a known predator is damning. Former President Bill Clinton's name comes up often. One witness in the documents claimed she heard Epstein say that Clinton likes them young, a claim his team has flatly denied. Clinton's representatives have said he cut off contact with Epstein around 2005. President Donald Trump is also mentioned frequently. The files contain unverified and second-hand allegations sent to the FBI, which the Justice Department has called unfounded and false. Trump himself has stated the documents cleared him of wrongdoing. Then there's Britain's Prince Andrew. His association with Epstein has been a total disaster for the royal family. Documents suggest Epstein and Andrew stayed in touch even after Epstein's 2008 conviction. In one 2010 email, the Duke, believed to be Andrew, appears to discuss having dinner with Epstein at Buckingham Palace, though it's unclear if the meeting ever happened. And the list keeps going. Magician David Copperfield, former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak, and tech billionaire Bill Gates are all named. In fact, one unverified claim in a draft email written by Epstein alleged that Gates contracted a sexually transmitted disease after an encounter on Epstein's island. You'd think that with the Transparency Act, the fight for the truth would be over. But the release of the files has been its own scandal. The Department of Justice missed its first deadline, fueling public suspicion. When the files finally started appearing, many were heavily redacted. In July 2025, the DOJ released a memo stating there was no evidence of a client list or of blackmail, which drew bipartisan criticism. The biggest issue is the numbers. The DOJ says it has released around 3.5 million pages. However, it has also acknowledged that over 6 million pages were initially identified as potentially responsive to the law. That means millions of documents could still be withheld from the public, though the DOJ has stated that only about 200,000 pages were held oral privileges. Congressional Democrats have called the partial release an outrageous and incredibly concerning violation of the law, arguing that it's not real transparency. This has only deepened public mistrust and raised more questions about what and who is still being protected. While headlines have focused on the famous names, the documents also spotlight the people who kept the whole machine running. At the very center was Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's longtime partner in crime. After Epstein's death, she became the main target. In 2021, she was convicted for her role in the sex trafficking ring and is now serving a 20-year prison sentence. Another key figure was French modeling agent Jean-Luc Brunel, who was suspected of supplying teenage girls to Epstein. He was facing charges in France before he died by suicide in his prison cell in 2022. The files also exposed the financial pipelines that kept the operation going. Documents show that powerful bankers and financiers kept ties with Epstein long after his conviction. Figures like Jess Starley, a top banker at JP Morgan, and Leon Black, a billionaire investor, are both mentioned in connection with Epstein's finances. These connections prove the network wasn't just social, it was embedded in the world of high finance, giving it a gloss of legitimacy and access to nearly unlimited resources. When you step back and look at the whole picture, what does it all mean? The dark secrets of the Epstein Files are not just about the sick actions of one man. They tell a much bigger, more disturbing story about the systems of power in America. This is a story about catastrophic failure of the justice system. That 2007 non-prosecution agreement wasn't just a mistake, it was a deliberate choice to protect a wealthy, connected man and his friends at the expense of his victims. It sent a loud and clear message. If you have enough power, the rules don't apply to you. It's also a story about the corrupting influence of money. Even after his 2008 conviction, Epstein wasn't exiled from elite circles. The documents show he continued to meet with billionaires, politicians, and celebrities. His wealth and connections acted as a shield, insulating him from the consequences that would have ruined anyone else. Finally, the controversy over the document release shows that the fight for real transparency is far from over. The redactions, the delays, and the millions of pages still out of public view suggest that powerful secrets are still being guarded. This lack of full disclosure only fuels the public's belief that we still don't have the whole truth. The recent release of long-sealed records has revealed unsettling connections and raised serious concerns about how influence can shape outcomes behind closed doors. But instead of clarity, it has opened the door to even more unanswered questions. With vast amounts of material still unreleased and many details remaining unclear, the full picture feels frustratingly incomplete, Will the complete story ever come into focus? And can accountability truly follow when so much remains hidden? I want to know your thoughts. Which part of this story surprised you the most? Share your perspective in the comments and subscribe for more in-depth explorations into stories that shape our world.